Hi there. I'm glad to welcome you to my channel, World of Stories. I have a lot of interesting life stories that I want to share with you. Enjoy listening.
Betty sat after a harsh reprimand made in front of all her colleagues, lowering her head and swallowing tears. What should she do? Where should she start to unravel the tangled mess of problems that had piled up, and would it even work? If only her mother were alive now. She had a knack for quickly and correctly finding the right solution. With a smile, she would weigh all the pros and cons and find the necessary answer. Why hadn't her daughter learned to do this? The answer came naturally. Her mother had always made decisions for her. Betty had lived her life by her guidance, following tried and tested recommendations. It was easy to rely on her mother's smart decisions, avoiding making her own. She had always lived in her mother's shadow. And now, here was the result. Naturally gifted with striking looks, open violet eyes, and a friendly smile, she stood out among her peers not only in appearance but also in her exceptional abilities. She excelled in school, got along well with others, was popular with the boys, and loved by her friends. Literature was her favorite subject, especially after reading Alexander Grin's tale Scarlet Sails. Captain Gray and his attitude towards his beloved became her ideal of a man. She compared all the boys, young men, and later, men, to this ideal. She immediately realized that none of them came close to the image she had constructed in her mind. Even the best of them fell short. So, she never truly loved anyone. She waited for the scarlet sails to appear on the horizon, but Gray never arrived. And at 50, it was futile to wait. Her mother passed away, leaving her alone in the world. It was lonely, and illnesses piled on. Not only did her blood pressure suddenly rise, causing excruciating headaches, but her joints, especially at night, ached from constant sedentary work and excess weight, as her doctor explained. The pain seemed to gnaw at her like a ferocious dog, punishing her for something. Betty couldn't understand what for. During sleepless nights, while trying to find a comfortable position for her aching joints, she thought she needed to take care of herself. Start eating right, begin moving more, but she continued to live the same unhealthy way, ignoring her doctor's recommendations, and workplace troubles emerged as well. Betty had always earned the respect of her colleagues for her meticulous attention to detail, timely completion of assigned tasks, pleasant demeanor, and willingness to help when asked. She was the epitome of elegance to them. She and her mother had meticulously planned every outfit. Now, significantly heavier due to unhealthy fast food, Betty still wore her old clothes that clung to her, emphasizing problem areas for everyone to see. She came to work sleep-deprived, feeling weighed down, mechanically performing calculations, making mistakes both in document preparation and elsewhere. She had received 2 reprimands from Mrs. Perez, her supervisor, for errors in documents. Her mother had taught her all her life that she should be the best or at least among the best, but now, she couldn't even keep up with others, lacking the energy to work. She had to work for another 7 years until the deferred state pension. 7 long years. Mrs. Perez warned that if the quality of her work didn't improve, she would be fired. How would she survive those 7 years then? No one would hire her elsewhere. There were plenty of young and agile candidates eager to take any recently vacated position, and they would immediately label her obsolete. How could she start a new job with a perpetually throbbing head? Betty couldn't even imagine it. She tried to calm down. Her mother was no longer here. So, she needed to solve everything herself, but nothing came to mind. If she went to work tomorrow feeling just as sluggish and indecisive, making mistakes again, she would be let go. What should she do? In the office, chairs were being moved as the workday came to an end. Everyone was getting ready to go home, except for Betty, who continued to sit, so that no one would see her tear-stained, miserable face. Let them all leave. She had nowhere to rush to and no one to go to. A light hand rested on her shoulder. It belonged to Mrs. Scott, the young cleaning specialist who had been hired just a week ago. The young girl supplemented her income by cleaning floors to pay for her education. Apparently, she had no one to help her either. Dolores, looking sympathetic, handed her a damp cloth. "I'm sorry. I overheard Mrs. Perez talking to the boss about how your performance has declined since you got sick. They discussed replacing you, but it's not about the quality of your work. 3 days ago, after work, I visited Mrs. Perez's sister, and she demanded that Zara get her daughter a job. Zara said there were no vacancies. The sister shrugged and said, "Fire someone from the old guard. What do you need them for? They're all sick and not very sharp anymore. They can't work properly. I just feel sorry for you. You often work when everyone else has left, but it's not appreciated. That's why I wanted to warn you." Betty sat there, stunned. They want to fire her from her job? Just like that? To make room for a young relative? Do the nearly 30 years she spent at that desk mean nothing? She knows the history of the factory. All the reorganizations, mergers, and divisions into separate enterprises. Her entire life was tied to the factory. Now, she's sick and old, and no one here wants her anymore? With her mother gone, and now without her job, what will she live on? Should she resort to begging? What else is she good at, to earn money? Just baking pies and cooking meals. But to work in production and earn money by selling prepared food, she needs so much. She instantly pictured the expense sheet for the factory cafeteria or cooking at home and selling on the street. All of this with painful legs. When every step sent a searing pain to her brain. Dolores had already finished cleaning the floor in the office, leaving only Betty's workspace untouched. Betty had to struggle to get up, leaning on the table with her hands. She groaned from the pain in her left knee. Dolores, looking sympathetically at her, suddenly said, "You're in so much pain. Take sick leave. There's your way out. The factory will pay you while you're on sick leave, and during that time, you can figure something out. At least get your health back, and then register with the job center if no one hires you elsewhere. You'll buy some time. Go see a doctor tomorrow, or they'll prepare a dismissal order. You need to act, not cry." Betty looked at the young girl who skillfully outlined a plan of action, as if she had lived for many years. She reasoned just like Mrs. Hill, calculating each step. Perhaps that's how she grew up in these harsh realities where people were not friends, but competitors. Betty was relieved that Dolores didn't see her as a competitor and was willing to offer advice. As for Mrs. Perez, who had worked with her for over 20 years, she saw Betty as a threat to her niece. She didn't care about Betty. She didn't care how the old colleague she had pushed out of her job would live. Although deep down, Betty believed that her colleagues sympathized with her, having lost her beloved mother. She thought that her colleagues understood how deeply she had fallen ill after her loved one's funeral and would feel sorry for her. She had tried to complain and seek sympathy from people she had considered almost friends. But it turned out to be different. Completely different. Her friends Gwen and Judy supported her, insisting that she should go to the hospital first and then deal with problems as they came. The next morning, she went to the outpatient clinic and immediately, her mother's familiar doctor gave her a referral to the hospital. She fell asleep in a stuffy 8-bed ward that evening. Betty was discharged from the hospital 3 weeks later, with only slight improvement. Her medical leave was extended for outpatient treatment. Due to medication and her own melancholy, she began experiencing blood pressure fluctuations. Concerned Gwen decided that Betty needed a change of scenery. Her attending physician advised her to go to a local sanatorium, which was nearby and offered medical treatment. Betty's friends gathered at her place. Gwen, who was always busy with her husband, children, and grandchildren, decided she could use a break and some relaxation. However, Judy, who seemed self-absorbed and didn't explain her reasons, said she couldn't go right now and suggested a different time. Gwen was displeased. "But the three of us had planned this," she exclaimed. Betty interrupted her friends. "All right, you too. Never mind. If she doesn't want to go, let her stay. Instead, tell me who will help me lose weight. With my 97 kilograms, my knee will never heal. After the hospital, I'm fine while sitting, but as soon as I walk again the next day, I can't even step on my foot." Judy laughed cheerfully. "I need help too. I broke my home scales." Betty, you only weigh 97 kilograms, but I have 103. Gwen grumbled. At our age, there's no joy left other than delicious food. Judy, with a sly look, said, "What about love, Gwen?" Gwen scoffed, "What love after 50? Betty cut them another slice of pie. "All right, you too. Have some more." Judy gladly took another bite. "Betty, you're such a great cook. You have golden hands. A man would worship you if he married you." Betty skeptically frowned. "Who would want an old and fat woman like me now?" Gwen chipped in. "For you're gray, who's gotten older and bald. And seriously, Betty, you're kind and wonderful. Do you know how many good single men would love to live with you?" Judy added, "Just feed him your Charlotte once, and after the cake, you won't be able to kick him out." Betty put another piece on Judy's plate. "Will you come with us to the sanatorium for treatment? We'll lead a healthy lifestyle there." But her friend remained silent, enjoying the tasty treat with tea. After obtaining the necessary documents, Gwen and Betty went to get their vouchers. They had been on the waiting list for almost 2 years. They returned with the coveted papers rather quickly. So, they set off together with Gwen. Early in the morning, there were only a few people on the bus. The journey to the sanatorium took only an hour, but Betty had baked some buns in the morning to treat her friend, knowing that Gwen would forget to eat while gathering everyone. She offered a fragrant bun to her friend and immediately heard a voice, almost a groan, from the seat behind. "I want to eat too." She turned around. 2 men were sitting right behind them. One was an elderly, bulky man who had uttered the complaint, and the other was a small, adult-faced man who had pretended to be dozing, probably to avoid joining the conversation. His eyelids dropped again. "Yes, I want to eat too," the elderly man exclaimed. Betty smiled at the elderly man and turned to open her bag. "Help yourself, please." He took 2 buns and nudged his companion. "Take some. They're delicious, and you might drool otherwise." The smaller man hesitated for a moment before finally taking a bun. Betty offered the bag to the women nearby, but they declined. The bus driver, catching a whiff of the delicious scent wafting from the back, shouted, "And me too." The elderly man introduced himself as Mr. Russell and immediately began complaining that no one had fed him buns like these because he had been widowed a year ago and now lived alone. He had fallen ill recently, but medicine wasn't helping. That's why he decided to go to the sanatorium. They say they teach you how to do daily exercises to regain your health and lose weight. Betty noticed that the young man, who had pretended to be dozing, opened his eyes and watched them attentively. He closed his eyelids again. Indeed, he was slim and young, while they were all well-fed, but they didn't exercise. Perhaps he looked down on them, and they simply felt sorry for him. Sorry because they knew that illnesses plagued those who moved little and didn't take care of themselves. He grew up with his grandmother, as his mother gave birth to him and then abandoned him in the maternity ward. "Why do I need such a pale and feeble guy? He'll die anyway," she said, and returned to the cheerful group that greeted her with a full glass. Why should she sit with a semi-dead child? His grandmother hardened him by making him stand in the stove's ashes, and then she made him run barefoot and wash his face with cold water. He was in poor health, but he grew stronger. When Harry was just 7 years old, his grandmother passed away. He was sent to an orphanage, where he fell ill again. Remembering his grandmother's tough love, he started exercising on his own, even though the other kids laughed at him. He didn't become a champion, but he became healthy. After finishing school, he went to culinary college. He always wanted to be well-fed because he couldn't afford to do so at his grandmother's or in the orphanage. He served as a cook in the army, and then, in civilian life, he fell in love with a girl named Candy, tall and well-built with luxurious long hair. She didn't even notice him and married a healthy and handsome guy, but her husband turned to alcohol and began abusing her. She hadn't had long hair for a while, and her back bent under the burdens of life. Her face, once pretty, was always covered in bruises. Her nose had been broken as well. But Candy's soul remained the same. Harry continued to love her. He waited for the day when she would grow tired of such a life. That's when he would help raise her little son, but for now, he worked in a cafe. Later, he rose to become the head chef in a restaurant. Eventually, he bought his own restaurant on installment payments from his former boss. His restaurant was now known for its excellent cuisine. The debt, it's true, hasn't been fully paid yet, but Harry will settle it soon. Candy, unable to endure such a life, passed away. Now, Candy's son, struggling with his alcoholic father and stepmother, faces an uncertain future. After Candy's death, Harry suddenly felt like there was no one left to live for, and it seemed pointless, especially at his age. By the age of 45, he started getting sick. He visited various hospitals, but all they did was ask for money. The richer you were, the more they wanted you to be ill. He realized that money couldn't cure depression or diseases. Saving a drowning man is the drowning man's own business, just like his grandmother's method. And it worked again. He went to the sanatorium to relax without any treatment. There was no point in filling a clean body with chemical junk. These people, on the other hand, didn't have a wise grandmother. They lived their lives as they pleased, relying on doctors. Yet, doctors couldn't even heal themselves or their loved ones, let alone others. Mr. Russell entertained the women throughout the journey, telling them jokes and funny stories. He was a jolly man. When they were checking in at the sanatorium, he asked for a room closer to the dining area to avoid a long walk. The women appreciated his humor and laughed, but Harry found him irritating. It's a shame he didn't buy a single room voucher, otherwise, he might end up with an annoying roommate. Harry requested a room farther from the dining area to avoid sharing with Barry. Gwen and Betty settled into a clean, small room without any particular demands or preferences. It had a nice hallway with a mirrored wardrobe, a bathroom, a living room with a sofa and a TV, and a bedroom with 2 beds. What else could a normal person need for a peaceful vacation? They were well-fed and enjoyed delicious meals in the dining room. The woods around the sanatorium were pristine, with benches, trash bins, paved pathways, and bird feeders. The medical staff were friendly and aimed to keep the guests in good spirits. On the bulletin board, Gwen read that there would be a buy-in player for entertainment after dinner at 7 p.m., and from 9 p.m. to 11 p.m., there would be dancing. All of it suited the women just fine. Mr. Russell, after having breakfast, was pleased. The food was good, and the vacation would be enjoyable, so his money wouldn't go to waste. Last year, he went to Toronto and paid a lot, but the food left much to be desired. They barely fed him, so he had to go to a cafe in the evening and pay extra. Here, the sanatorium was conveniently located near the city, and everything seemed to be working out nicely. Most importantly, he had found the love of his life. A woman who baked as well as she did. He hadn't eaten buns like those since childhood. He had to take her with him. She was a bit on the plump side, but her face was cute. Well, you don't drink water from someone's face. What mattered was that she was full-figured, just like him. His kitchen was a studio combined with the living room, and in the bedroom, they could easily fit another bed, or he could buy a modern bedroom set. He would fulfill all her whims, but of course, within reason. Betty inadvertently mentioned that she was a good cook too. Life would be great with her. He had been longing for his home-cooked meals since his wife Larissa passed away. It's hard to prepare delicious food just by following recipes from books without practical experience. He needed to make her get used to him right away. After dinner, the women decided to attend a musical gathering with the buy-in player. Mr. Russell had to accompany them to the music lounge. There, a cheerful crowd had gathered. Around the buy-in player, people sat on chairs, chattering amateur lovers of choral singing. Barry couldn't stand amateur performances, but here he had to sit and listen to dozens of elderly people singing familiar songs from their childhood, off and off-key. Of course, he would have preferred to relax in his room on the couch, but he had to sit on a hard chair and endure all of this. After the musical gathering, an hour later, there would be dancing, but Barry hoped that the plump Miss Cox wouldn't want to go to the dance hall. He would persuade her to stay with him if she wanted to. Let her sit with her friend, it would be more enjoyable. Fortunately, he had brought some good tea, sugar, and candy with him. Betty and Gwen sang with pleasure and were quite good. Finally, they announced the last song, and everyone enthusiastically sang along. Then they warmly thanked the violin player. Gwen lingered behind, while Betty went into the corridor and sat on a sofa. How nice it was. She felt light-hearted. Mr. Russell was immediately by her side and invited her and her friend for tea. She laughed. She and Gwen decided to go dancing. If he wanted, she'd invite him too. What was there to do in the room? Dancing together in the dance hall would be more fun, listening to music and watching people. But what was there to watch? Barry had already seen enough of the crowd in the dining room and the singing by the violin, and now he was tired. He really wanted to rest. He escorted the ladies back to their rooms and went to his own, lay down, and immediately fell asleep. Honestly, Betty didn't really want to go dancing, but Gwen insisted. The women, dressed up and groomed, headed to the dance hall, where the music was lively, and the guests were dancing. Passing by the mirrors in the corridor, Betty noticed that she looked rather nice because she was smiling happily, and her cheeks were flushed. The hall was dimly lit, with flashes of colorful lights as the music played. Almost everyone was dancing, except for a few very elderly guests. After a fast dance, Betty's mood was splendid. This was what she had been missing, moving to the music. She lived too boring and lonely a life. Gwen was right to criticize her for it. As soon as the music started playing, a well-dressed man in a nice suit approached her. He danced skillfully and with pleasure. He smelled of good cologne. They introduced themselves. He introduced himself as Mr. Rogers and immediately mentioned that he had worked as a director at a company up north until retirement. Now he lived in the city in a 3-bedroom apartment and had 2 daughters, also with apartments he owned. He was looking for a wife, a good housewife, but he wanted her to be someone he could proudly appear with in public. Other women in the room looked at her with envy because there weren't many men around. Betty and Victor looked like a good match. Mr. Rogers skipped the fast dances, considering them unserious. After inviting Betty to a tango, he praised her. Interestingly, he noticed from the sidelines that Betty behaved modestly. As he put it, she didn't jump or skip around wildly to the wild music but danced gracefully, considering her age. Betty felt cheerful. He didn't even think about the fact that it might be difficult for her to move quickly with her aching legs. She could have jumped and skipped. What a boring man he was. They announced the last dance. Mr. Rogers once again invited Betty and, taking her hand, didn't let go, even when the music stopped and Betty wanted to go to her room with Gwen. He sternly told Gwen, "You can go. I'll make sure your friend gets back safely." Gwen just looked questioningly at Betty, who didn't immediately know how to react to such an authoritative order. Only when Gwen left, wishing him a good night, did Betty quickly head to her room. The next morning after breakfast, she, Gwen, and Mr. Russell went for a walk in the woods. It had frozen overnight, and the air was still, so clean and transparent that it made you want to move and enjoy this wonder, something they were deprived of in the big city. They unexpectedly ran into Betty's dance partner from the night before. Seeing him next to her friends, he passed by, greeting them dryly with a slight nod of his head. Gwen immediately teased him, "Did your dance partner get offended, perhaps? What did you do to him after the dances last night? I wonder what he was expecting." Barry straightened up, wanting to ask something, but he stayed silent. So, everything was clear. He knew that dances don't lead to anything good. Women are strange creatures, you turn away for a moment, and there's someone else right there, he sighed, but he couldn't lose this woman. "I guess I'll have to drag myself to the dance floor instead of a relaxing evening." At least it was clear that he had chosen her for a reason. Other men liked her too, but she would definitely be with him. The day flew by unnoticed for Betty. There were many impressions, pleasant therapeutic procedures, new acquaintances, and the almost forgotten feeling of male attention. Delicious food she didn't have to cook herself. Walks in the pristine and carefully preserved nature. At the dance, Mr. Russell was constantly by her side that evening and invited her to tango, but he danced clumsily. His crumpled suit, in which he apparently took a nap after lunch, and his dirty shoes irritated Betty, robbing her of the joy of music and dance she had experienced the previous night. She wanted to shake his hand and move away. 2 or 3 other men invited her to dance, but after each dance, Mr. Russell, or as Gwen called him, Barry, was right there next to her. She didn't like him either, but at least there was some man in her friend's life. Mr. Rogers didn't come to the dance hall that evening, and Gwen thought he might have been offended by Betty and found someone else. But she was mistaken. The man appeared when they announced the last dance. Waiting for Betty to leave the hall, he stopped her in the corridor. He sat her down on a small couch and began explaining what he wanted from her. He was 15 years older than her and really liked her. He was willing to live with her for as long as God granted him, but he had no intention of entering into a legal marriage. She could rent out her own apartment. Her salary and later her pension could be kept for herself and spent as she saw fit. She could live with him and use his property. For household expenses and food, he would give her a monthly sum. They would definitely travel, he had enough money. But she shouldn't count on an inheritance after his death. He had already made his will. Everything he had was allocated. He would leave it to his daughters. He would leave her a certain amount. She would return to her own apartment. He fell silent, then calmly added, "Think it over. Don't rush. It's very beneficial for you." Betty remained silent. She didn't even know how to react to such an offer. She didn't necessarily need legal registration, but he hadn't said a word about the most important thing, love and respect for her feelings. He simply calmly voiced an oral contract between an employer and someone who should provide services for a certain period of time. Moreover, in exchange for food and lodging in his place. In the past, they used to hire servants like this. What role would she play for him? A housekeeper, cook, cleaner, and eventually a caregiver? And on top of that, would she provide intimate services without love and respect? Just at his command. After all, he would feed her, so she was expected to live for his convenience. Betty decisively withdrew her hand from his strong fingers. "Sorry, Mr. Rogers. I won't even think about it. Your offer doesn't suit me. I want love and happiness in a relationship with a man, and you're offering me a simple verbal agreement for cohabitation and providing services for your convenience indefinitely in exchange for food and lodging, like a servant. I can understand you to some extent, but I won't agree. I'd rather live alone. You probably don't need your daughters and want a nanny to take care of you for the rest of your life?" Gwen had never seen Betty, usually calm and composed, react with such indignation and outrage as when she recounted Mr. Rogers' proposal. "Gwen. These elderly men are just waiting for someone to pamper them, fulfill their whims, and bake them pastries. Where are the men willing to do something heroic for their beloved, or at least love me and make me happy with small gestures? Yes, I will try to brighten his life day and night for such a man. Like a fool, I've dreamed of romantic love my whole life, of a scarlet sails. I could watch my favorite painting for hours and dream of Gray coming to me, and I finally got it." Gwen had to turn her friend's story into a joke. "Judy, we'll tell them how the man wanted to turn you into a multifunctional servant in exchange for food and lodging. Especially since he's so healthy and strong that he'll outlive you, and you won't get the promised compensation in his will. You'll be serving him for years in vain." Finally, Betty laughed and calmed down. As she was falling asleep, she thought that no one, except her mother, had ever dared to dictate her freedom, and she wouldn't allow herself to be treated this way. However, Mr. Russell still hoped for a mutual relationship with the woman he liked, especially since not only did he hold her in high regard, but also a distinguished man like Victor. "She's quite capricious, she doesn't like anyone. Thinks so highly of herself." But remembering the taste of pastries, Barry went back to her. Though he decided he wouldn't spend his money in vain, fearing that she would leave him for someone else. Today, he decided to enter the concert hall early. Let her and her friend buy tickets themselves. When they arrived, he would reserve seats next to him for them. He would take care of it. Let her appreciate that. After breakfast, Barry decided to invite Betty to the woods, to walk and talk seriously. Why was she talking to everyone, walking, dancing, and laughing with everyone? How long could she chase after her? But Betty, citing a small evening party, didn't go to the woods with him, and all day long, he couldn't find an opportunity to be alone with her. They arrived at the concert late and sat somewhere in the back, even though Barry loudly called them to him. At the dance, Betty also danced with everyone, and after the dances, she quickly left with her friend. The next morning, Barry saw from the window that Betty had come out onto the porch. She probably wanted to take a walk alone before breakfast. He quickly got dressed but caught up with her in the far alley. When she noticed him, the woman turned away, but then greeted him. When asked why she had come out early, she replied that she had a headache so severe that it was impossible to speak. Barry decided that it was better not to broach serious conversations today and went to the dining hall for breakfast. Betty was glad that Barry had stopped following her. She could enjoy nature in solitude, watch the birds, and listen to the sounds of the forest. It had been cold at night. Even the tiny puddles on the path had frozen over, and some had turned into small shiny mirrors. She watched as two ruffled sparrows fought over food at the feeder when suddenly, slipping on a frozen puddle, she awkwardly flailed her arms, trying to maintain her balance but ended up falling onto the frozen asphalt path. A sharp, excruciating pain shot through her leg, which had awkwardly twisted under her weight. Betty cried out loudly and groaned. Tears blurred her vision and choked her. Why am I so unlucky? I probably broke my leg. She let out a weak cry, but it was more like a hoarse exhale. No one would hear her now, everyone had gone to breakfast. Could it be that there was no one to help her? Pain confused her thoughts. The asphalt path chilled her body. She could catch a cold again. Then the chronic bronchitis with its persistent cough would return. Her leg had slightly calmed down, so Betty tried to move, but she groaned hoarsely again. The pain, like a rabid dog, sank its sharp teeth into her leg. Despite the chills, she broke out in a cold sweat. Would she lie here in this remote alley, and no one would see her? Suddenly, she heard a man's voice. Ma'am, are you okay? Betty croaked. Yes, please help. The pain is terrible. I think I've broken my leg. Can you walk with my assistance? No. Don't touch me. Call a doctor. The man first ran off, then loudly shouted to someone. Quick, get a doctor. The lady has broken her leg. It felt like time was stretching out immeasurably. Although later they told her that they quickly took her for an X-ray and determined that there was no fracture. However, it turned out to be a severe dislocation, and her leg had to be put in a cast. Betty had to learn to move her cumbersome body with the help of crutches through endless corridors. In addition to the pain in her leg, her arms, unaccustomed to physical strain, began to ache at night. The intense pain in her chafed and raw armpits was exhausting. Betty quietly cried into her pillow, so as not to disturb Gwen, who had been taking care of her diligently all day. Now she had finally rested. And what kind of rest was this? Tomorrow she would have to ask the doctor to take her home by car. But how would she live alone in her apartment? Gwen wouldn't be able to take care of her there. She had her treatment here, and at home, she had a husband, children, and grandchildren. This was the time when she had no one in the whole wide world. Betty couldn't count on her family's help. She would have to hire a housekeeper. But what would she live on by herself? After paying for her care and the apartment, there wouldn't be much left for food. She'd end up losing weight. It would be better to stay in the sanatorium. They would treat her and feed her. Gwen would be nearby. She just had to stay still. Her friend would bring her food, and she would have to temporarily give up treatment, and then she would see. After trying to make her painful leg more comfortable and applying fresh ointment to the chafed armpits, she closed her eyes and fell asleep, calming down. In the morning, Gwen brought her breakfast, brewed the recommended herb with boiling water, and went for a walk. Betty was reading a book when there was a knock at the door. A male voice asked for permission to enter. Come right in, she shouted. Maybe it was Barry. She shouldn't have been so capricious, then she would have gone to breakfast with him in the far alley, and she wouldn't be lying in bed now. She would have known where to fall. A stranger in a blue tracksuit appeared at the bedroom door. It was hard to tell if it was a boy or a man. He paused, greeted her, and inquired about her well-being. "Thank you, I'm feeling better." "Why are you skipping breakfast?" She didn't laugh heartily. "I've probably eaten my limit. It's hard to drag myself around on crutches now." "Please, have a seat," she nodded, indicating a chair. Now she understood that he was her savior who had found her, nearly freezing, in the woods. "Thank you very much for helping me. I was afraid I'd catch a chill lying on the cold asphalt." The phone rang, and the man apologized and answered it while turning away from her. He listened while Betty observed him attentively, small, slender, with a sharp nose, but well-proportioned. His eyes were attentive and intelligent, dark brown. His hair and eyelashes were light. His skin was very pale, his lips thin and transparently pink. His voice was unexpectedly deep and stern when he spoke on the phone. But when he finished the call and looked at Betty, he smiled and spoke gently. "I apologize. Am I bothering you? What do you do for a living?" Betty started talking and began to share about her work and her life. The warm, understanding brown eyes encouraged her. She looked at that thin face, as if tightly covered with skin, and it seemed like she had known that faint warm smile and those gentle eyes for a long time. It was as if a younger brother she never had was sitting before her. Gwen arrived, and the man suddenly became flustered, realizing he hadn't introduced himself yet. "Harry." Betty laughed. "Harry, go with Gwen for lunch. Then take a short walk and please return to me. You tell stories so interestingly." The first person to visit her after lunch and a walk was Barry. He kicked off his dirty shoes in the hallway, sprawled on the living room couch like a bear, and chuckled at his own jokes while looking through the door into the bedroom at Betty lying on the bed. Harry walked in, looked in surprise at the casually discarded dirty men's shoes, size 45, and the huge laughing man sprawled on the couch. His belly, wobbling inappropriately, protruded from under his unbuttoned shirt, and, as always, he thought he looked comical next to this hulking figure. The little man, all buttoned up and tucked in, was tiny for a man, as if he were wearing teenage shoes, size 37, and even white socks. And as if to confirm his thoughts, he saw neatly placed women's shoes, much larger than his own. But Betty called from the bedroom. "Harry, come here. Mr. Russell is telling funny stories. Let's listen together." However, this didn't sit well with the admirer on the couch. He had known her for a long time and could count on her favor, but to her, he was still just Mr. Russell, and this upstart hadn't been around for long, yet they were already calling him Harry. The man got up from the couch, leaning forward and supporting himself on his hands in a dominant posture, glowering at the cooing lovebirds. Realizing that they were ignoring him, he stood up, laboriously squeezed his feet into his shoes, and without saying goodbye, went to relax in his room. Today, at the dance, he'd find himself a partner for a walk. After all, Betty wouldn't be able to move properly until the end of her treatment. So, let her stay with this weakling. Betty had to spend the whole day in her room, occasionally hobbling on crutches down the hallway for her treatments. At night, her entire exhausted body ached and throbbed. She desperately wanted to eat, and it was heartbreaking. Life passed by, people lived healthy and happy lives, going for walks, dancing, enjoying their food and company. Everyone had someone they loved, a son, a daughter, a grandchild, a spouse. But she only had Gwen, who was always busy, and Judy, who was self-absorbed. Her mother had realized too late that Betty would be left all alone in the world because of her. And now, finding a partner was impossible. Not because there weren't decent men around. Here, for example, was Mr. Russell. He immediately noticed that she had a fresh face and beautiful eyes. But she couldn't imagine her life with him. He would wheeze next to her all evening, smacking his lips in pleasure at the table and waiting for her to serve him everything and then clean up. His lack of neatness annoyed her. Apparently, his ex-wife hadn't taught him to take care of himself. He needed a nanny, and at night, he'd snore in her ear. What about Mr. Rogers, whom she met on the very first day at the dance? Strong, fit, tidy, a former executive, but much older than her. No, Betty didn't like him either. He didn't even try to hide his self-serving approach, openly suggesting that she live with him without any formal commitment. To enjoy everything he had to offer until his death, but without expecting any inheritance. In essence, this meant becoming his housemaid and cook, fulfilling the duties of a wife without any rights, but on a full pension. He didn't even mention love and failed to understand that Betty felt offended by his proposal. As for little Harry, who now brightened her dreary days, she didn't even consider him as a potential suitor. He was younger than her, and in his presence, she felt like an old woman. Betty admitted to herself that she wanted love, and then she would do everything in her power for her beloved. Where was her long-awaited Gray, or was he non-existent? She wished for happiness to nestle in her soul like a fluffy kitten and never leave Betty. Oh, dreamer green. How many hearts, because of your fairy tale, wander the world, hoping for their crimson sails, in their youth. And then, not finding them, they resign themselves and spend the rest of their lives arguing in the kitchen with the chosen partner. Betty couldn't blame her mother's selfish desires for leaving her without a partner. Mom. Please forgive me for such thoughts. It's not your fault. No. She had always waited for her Gray, but unfortunately, the horizon had never even hinted at the crimson sails. Betty buried her nose in her damp pillow. What are a crimson sails at the age of 50? It's not even worth mentioning such dreams. They'll think I'm immature or something. And she still measured her entire life by this beautiful legend, and this was the result. Finally, the door opened. Someone had come at last. It was Gwen with some new friends. Soon, Mr. Russell burst into her room with flowers. Wheezing, he now sat beside Betty on an uncomfortable chair. In the living room, the couch and all the chairs were occupied by the women who had come with Gwen. How hadn't he thought earlier to sit right next to the plump beauty who was in demand and who baked wonderfully? He rejoiced. Now she only talked to him and smiled at him, but it made things even worse. Betty moved over on the bed and said to the pygmy who had entered with flowers, her eyes sparkling with joy. Harry. Sit on the bed. Betty, looking at him with surprise and enthusiasm, continued, and where did you manage to get flowers and a vase? Then, perching on the edge of the bed beside Betty, Harry settled down without even making the bed sag. Mr. Russell decided to ask a direct question. Betty. What do you want in life? What's your goal or dream? I don't mean any romantic nonsense, but a normal human dream. The woman's eyes sparkled again, and her face, lit up, almost looked youthful. I've always wanted to see Paris. What a silly dream. Mr. Russell irritably repeated. You'll see this ordinary city where people live just like we do in our normal town. They go to work, eat, sleep, and die. What's the point? What will it give you? You'll just waste a ton of money. You could say you're throwing it away. No. Betty said softly. I think that if I put my hand on the base of the Eiffel Tower in Paris, even just for a moment, I'll be healthy and able to dance in the square by the Notre Dame Cathedral, where Esmeralda danced on the stones. I don't know how yet, but I'll try to get there or die trying. What a silly dream. Mr. Russell repeated irritably. Come back to Earth already. There are so many ways to live happily. You don't need to run or travel somewhere for that. Enjoy delicious food, sleep soundly, and live next to a worthy person. Everything is possible for you. You can do it. I can't forget your roles I had on the first day. I'll definitely invite myself to your place when we return to the city. Thank you, Harry. Betty looked at him with grateful eyes. But a dream is not just roles or something useful. It's what the soul yearns for, what a person needs to feel like a human being, not just a creature that consumes and then excretes waste. The irritated man clapped his hands on his knees and got up from the chair. You, Miss Cox, can keep dreaming about your fairy tale pleasure, and I'll go enjoy a real meal. Come on, Harry. You definitely need to refuel and save up a few grams of fat. Harry obediently rose and, as if apologizing, said quietly, I have a strict eating schedule every 3 hours, but I'll definitely come after lunch. Betty gave him an encouraging smile. She had already extracted everything from him that he reluctantly shared about himself, so she knew that after surgery for a stomach ulcer, he had only 1/3 of his stomach left. That's why Harry was so thin. Although he didn't look emaciated and claimed to be healthy. Of course, Harry went for a walk every morning. Then he worked out in the gym and went swimming. He was 4 years younger than her, but if he didn't maintain his physical fitness, he wouldn't look as youthful as he did. Only a 4-year age difference, and he was still active and lively despite his ailments, while she, like a heavy log, looked 20 years older. By the way, Barry was 6 years older than Harry and almost a senior citizen. He hardly moved at all but ate heartily. Gwen gave him all the starchy and sweet treats that were served in the dining room to her and Betty. It was clear now why he was drawn to her. He liked her rolls. He hoped she would cook deliciously. No. She wouldn't. Just like Mr. Russell had brushed off her dream. He had trampled all over it with muddy boots. A foolish dream, and he only pitied her for the money she'd waste. He didn't believe that her dream could really make her recover. According to him, Betty's future life should revolve around crawling around her apartment, baking him rolls, and cooking borscht. It was fortunate that she hadn't mentioned crimson sails and gray. Barry probably would have thought she was out of her mind, but at their age, hardly anyone would understand such a dream. And she wasn't Asal, she was just a 97-kilogram woman, maybe even over 100 kilograms now without any movement, with aspirations for ephemeral happiness. Who would want to create happiness with their own hands for such a wreck? It was absurd, that's all. Maybe Barry was right. Happiness was in sleeping soundly and eating well. Deep down in her soul, she also understood that her dreams were almost unreal and ephemeral. From a practical point of view, they were unnecessary. Harry saw that she was downcast, and her puffy eyelids indicated that she was crying again after being left alone. He had already realized that she wasn't a cumbersome 50-year-old hag but just a shy young girl trapped in an aging body. Simple, cheerful, dreamy, but lonely and helpless now, making her unhappy. Never mind, tonight, Brad, his friend, would bring a wheelchair. His uncle had received it but didn't use it for long, and Betty would need it here and later at home. Although, how could he explain to her that you had to actively fight the disease, not lie down and just cry? But most people didn't understand that and just waited passively, only noticing each new deterioration in their health, hoping that doctors and medications would help. Harry used to think like that too, but he realized in time that it wasn't true. He started studying advice from doctors who had themselves experienced the sad ordeal of losing their health and had restored themselves to working condition. But it wasn't enough to read and understand. You also had to follow their recommendations. This required effort to change your lifestyle and establish proper nutrition. Even here, in the medical facility, Harry believed that the diet was designed by dietitians with errors, too abundant, excessively fatty, overly sweet, and starchy, as if designed for a healthy person who overate. But what was the goal? To make them sick too? Harry ate very selectively and left everything on the table that he considered unnecessary and harmful to his body. But his table neighbors would take it with his permission and eat that food. He had been a neglected child since childhood and was used to taking care of himself. Understanding this, he wasn't afraid of the long and systematic day-to-day execution of tedious but light physical exercises. Due to malnutrition in his childhood, Harry hadn't grown much, and now, next to Betty and Mr. Russell, he felt somewhat underdeveloped and puny, like a little dwarf. But fortunately, he was healthy today and visited the sanatorium every year for rest and prevention. Harry really liked Betty. He had never met someone with such a pure soul. He never said a sharp or mocking word about anyone, treating everyone kindly and gently. Being with her was comfortable and warm for Harry. She explained that she had spent almost her entire life taking care of her sick mother, who had given birth to her without a husband. As they say nowadays, she existed solely for her mother. And it turned out that way. The daughter was with her until her last breath, but in the end, she was left alone and no longer a young spinster. She had also turned out to be a sick wreck. She had never thought about herself and her health. It was too late now to start something, to build a family. No strength, no health, no opportunities. She understood this perfectly. A respectable age, missed love, and ahead only illnesses and a difficult life for an aging person with no joy, love, or help from loved ones. That's why her pure violet eyes sometimes filled with tears. In them, you could see the fear of such a joyless and lonely life. But did she understand that if she married Barry, she would face kitchen slavery and taking care of this selfish man again? And he, in return for delicious rolls, would make her believe in him and brutally crush her dream. He might choke on those rolls, but he wouldn't provide the money for her trip to Paris. And if she had her own means, he wouldn't allow her to spend them on what he considered a foolish dream, and she would resign herself to it. Her violet eyes would fade, then lose their sparkle altogether. Leaving the dining room, he paused, waiting for Barry to go to Betty together. But Barry was once again regaling the women with his jokes. They laughed merrily, somewhat embarrassed, forming a circle around him. Older men were scarce here, and someone like Mr. Russell was in high demand. Harry waited for him a little and decided to ask. Would he go to Betty now? But Barry, looking casually at Harry, smirked. Why would I sit by her bedside? She's a foolish dreamer. She's been making up all sorts of nonsense for herself. Let her indulge in her unattainable dreams. She has her life, I have mine. Embracing the cheerful women, he walked away with them towards the exit. Yes, no one loves the sick. The living are drawn to the living. Betty was pleased when Harry arrived. How nice that you came. Gwen went for a walk in the village with the women, and I'm bored. When her friend returned in the evening, Harry listened with pleasure to Betty's enthusiastic story about Paris, the city of her dreams. Gwen was surprised. But where is Mr. Russell? I have no idea. It's a good thing he didn't come. We have nothing in common except for the roles. And here I was thinking you found your own Grey. Gwen. Why do you want to tease me like that? What Grey are you talking about? That's enough joking about me. I won't tell you anything else secret. Harry. Don't listen to her. Betty pouted like a child, seeing her friends exchange amused glances. And you, Harry, are you going to laugh at me too? I thought you understood me. No. No. I won't. I'm also looking for my asshole. Betty turned away from the wall in a huff. I don't want to talk to you. Harry stood up and, gesturing to Gwen with his eyes towards the offended dreamer, shrugged. Smiling, Gwen waved her hand. We're going to dinner. Her friend didn't respond. In the corridor, Harry asked. Did we hurt her with our jokes? I don't know what got into her. She'll get over it. After the evening walk, when Harry was heading back to the building, Brad called him. Come out. I brought you a wheelchair. The wheelchair was pretty much new. Here, take it. I have no use for it. Let it be a gift to a good person like you. Wheel your sick princess around. In the morning, Betty moved from the bed to the wheelchair, her eyes filled with excitement as she looked at Harry. I don't know how to handle it. And what am I here for? He wheeled the wheelchair to the park. The April sun was shining brightly. The birds were chirping, and the laughter of the vacationers filled the air. Betty was comfortably seated, absorbing the spring atmosphere and resting after the loneliness in her stuffy room. It was as if she had been reborn. She was seeing the blue sky, the fluttering birds, a squirrel leaping between the branches for the first time. A feeling of joy and freedom, not suffocating walls. It might be comfortable, but it was still a prison. Harry. Thank you. You're a magician, she laughed gratefully and turned to him. Her brown eyes shone golden in the sunlight, her pale lips turned pink in a contented smile, and a blush appeared on her thin cheeks. I told you that there was no need to cry, everything will pass, and you will be healthy again. These are temporary difficulties. The very next day, a cheerful Betty was rolling through the hallways for treatments, dining in the cafeteria, and even attending choir and dances in the evening. She simply sat next to Harry. The music played loudly, and elderly and sick people danced as best as they could, but everyone was having fun. Mr. Russell was now dancing energetically with a petite woman, triumphantly glancing at the others. After the dance, he and Harry lingered in the corridor. He sat on the couch, and she in an armchair. They talked quietly about everything in the world. Betty had slept peacefully and happily for 2 nights, forgetting about tears and sorrows. When the vacation period came to an end, her cast was removed, and Betty had confidently learned to move around. Harry's friend Brad, a complete opposite to Harry, came from the city. He was a joker and a jester. He entertained Betty and Gwen throughout the journey. They burst into cheerful laughter, while Harry just smiled. First, they dropped off Gwen, and then Betty. The men helped her carry her bag upstairs and put the wheelchair away. Betty smiled at them one last time and was left alone. Her beloved and familiar apartment suddenly felt dull and lonely. She hadn't even thought about the fact that the refrigerator was empty. She would have to call Gwen tomorrow to buy groceries. She was worried about carrying heavy bags and walking alone in the streets. She wasn't starving, of course, but loneliness crept in by night. Tears welled up again, and she cried for a long, miserable time. In the morning, Judy called. "I finally managed to catch you and Gwen. I met this guy, you won't believe it. Help me set the table. I'm at the store now, and I'll be right there. We'll bake a cake. You know my oven is terrible, but everything else is ready. I haven't celebrated my birthday. I was waiting for you and Gwen. And guess who my guy is? It's Willie from our class." Could it really be Judy saying this? She used to call herself a chubby girl. For the past few years, her only interest had been eating delicious food, and after a meal, regardless of where she was, she would assume a horizontal position. Her once black and shiny eyes had dulled, and she would start to doze off. How was Judy able to rush over so quickly now? Usually, she could hardly move from one place to another. However, the doorbell rang quite soon. Betty had only just put the 3rd cake layer in the oven and was whipping the cream. Judy rushed in, out of breath and sweaty, taking up the entire small entryway with her presence. She immediately threw her coat on the floor and rushed into the kitchen, discovering the nearly finished cake. "Betty, you're amazing," she exclaimed, embracing her friend and nearly squeezing her. Where was her lazy composure? Could it be that she was really in love? Was such a thing possible? But the fact was evident. Although Judy somewhat resembled a manic hippopotamus, she was so excited and happy that Betty couldn't help but feel a twinge of envy. Why did she never experience such bright enthusiasm? But she was genuinely happy for her friend. It seemed that happiness, albeit a little delayed, had finally found its way to her. Judy's husband had passed away about 20 years ago. She was left with a daughter. The teenager demanded a lot of time and energy, and she would never accept another man. As long as her daughter grew up and started living with her husband independently, her mother didn't even attempt to remarry. Judy chatted incessantly, sharing all the details of her meeting with her idol. When Gwen and Betty went to the sanatorium, she felt very lonely and began looking for ways to fill her free time. She decided to take painting classes. After all, in her youth, she had been a decent artist. It was there that she ran into Willie, a classmate from their school days. They had almost had a romance back then, but their youthful love never materialized and ended before it even began. Judy met her husband and got married. She even switched to part-time studies at the university because she gave birth to a daughter soon after. Imagine, we met, and we were both amazed. We've changed so much, but then we started reminiscing about our happy school years, and we wanted to see each other more and feel like we did back when we were young. We gradually got used to it, and now we don't even want to be apart. I've practically been living at his place for 2 weeks now. It turns out that being together is so wonderful. Judy rolled her olive-like black eyes, expressing her happiness without words. It's just pure enjoyment and happiness. We wake up together, have breakfast together. After work, we have dinner together, watch TV, or go for walks, and then we go to bed. She winked at Betty. Do you know how nice it is to fall asleep next to each other? It's warm, cozy, and peaceful in the soul. Suddenly, she jumped up, making Betty startle. Is our cake burning? Shh, Judy. You scared me. Judy laughed heartily. Sorry, Betty. While I was chatting away, you managed to take out the cake layer, put the pie in, and decorate the cake with cream. Your hands are golden. She slyly glanced from under her eyelashes. But Willie loves me just the way I am. Chubby, scatterbrained, and talkative. He says I shouldn't lose weight. After all, he loves every kilogram of me, and I've already lost 7 kilograms because of happiness. He won't understand. I still have a lot of those kilograms. Carefully packing the cake and pie, they headed to Willie's place, where the celebration was planned. Willie was a former military man, quite slim but with a budding belly. He greeted Judy with kisses and Betty with cheerful exclamations. Betty. It's been so many years since we last saw each other, right? Meet my friend from the service, Kevin. The friend was a tall, gray-haired man with a stern expression. He greeted them dryly and assessed Betty with his gaze as if he were about to make a purchase. It made her shiver. Judy and Willie had definitely conspired to introduce her to this Kevin. Her mood soured instantly. It was as if she were seeing herself through his eyes, and she didn't like the view. Probably, he didn't like it either. But then Gwen and her husband Victor arrived. The hosts invited them to the table. After they toasted in honor of the birthday girl, Betty relaxed and decided that she was perfectly fine just the way she was. Whoever didn't like it could look away. Kevin sat very straight, taking good care of her. He sang a couple of songs on the guitar for the birthday girl. Then, the thought of dancing occurred to Judy. Kevin invited Betty to dance a tango. After a few drinks, Judy danced, frolicking and bumping into people like a playful hippo. Willie absolutely loved it, and they both laughed merrily. Kevin remained serious. It was clear he didn't approve of Judy's behavior. He thought a bit when he tried the pie and cake over tea and even gave a toast. Betty, here's to your golden hands. I've never had such pastries in my life. He gallantly kissed her hand. When they were getting ready to leave, Kevin took care of Betty, handing her coat, and calmly asked, to your place or mine? Betty was taken aback by such an unexpected proposition and quickly smiled as she replied. I was planning to go to Gwen and Victor's. Why would you interfere with them? Let's go to my place. No, I need to talk to Gwen. He smiled understandingly. Of course, consult with your friend. Just think, do you have any other option like me? Unlikely. As Betty said her goodbyes and curled up on Gwen's couch, wrapped in a blanket, she pondered. Could it be that she was hopelessly foolish? Such a man. She imagined her colleagues' astonishment. A spinster like her having such a wonderful admirer. Even the girls would be envious, and the money problem wouldn't be as acute. While she had been short on money, it hadn't been the most important thing. She had lost her zest for life and interest in the world, even in food. Betty lost a lot of weight in a month, but it didn't bring her happiness. Although she had dreamed of it before, looking in the mirror didn't please her. Her face had become gaunt, and it had taken on a suffering expression, her skin had sagged. As soon as she went to bed, a senseless but particularly terrifying sticky fear gradually overwhelmed her, pressing heavily on her throat and chest, making it hard to breathe. Betty suddenly broke out in a cold sweat, lying in damp sheets, struggling to breathe. Medications were prescribed to Betty, but the same thing happened every night. How could she overcome this fear and live in peace? But how can you get rid of something you can't even fathom? Towards morning, she would fall asleep and wake up around noon, feeling exhausted and unwell. She stopped going out and tried not to let anyone into her home. She lay powerless all day, and then the difficult night loomed ahead. The thought that maybe this was the end began to cross her mind more often. The end of her insignificant and unfulfilled life. She was getting worse. Perhaps the earth was calling her? Her friends didn't know what to do or how to help. Kevin, who believed that she was simply being hysterical, was particularly irritating. He had never been sick and assumed that Betty was inventing illnesses for herself just because she wasn't doing anything and was always alone. He had become so annoying to her that she called Harry and asked him to play the role of her suitor so that Kevin would see a rival and back off. Harry was surprised by such a request but came to her. "Harry. Help me, please. Don't you marry him? We're too old for love. I'm afraid of making a fool of ourselves. I doubt if we're right for each other. He's slim and I'm still on the heavy side even though I've lost a bit of weight. The main thing is, there's no love. Wasn't he the Grey you've been waiting for? Gwen told me that Kevin is a handsome man. He's got everything. Harry. It's not about external beauty, it's about the soul. He doesn't have a soul, or I don't see it. I don't even know what I want myself." They had tea and talked when Kevin showed up. Betty opened the door to him. "Sorry, Kevin. I have another man now." He glanced at her shoes. "You've traded me for a boy?" Then, turning sharply, he left. Expecting reproaches and a scandal, she breathed a sigh of relief. "Harry. Thank you. I didn't know how to get rid of him. I couldn't just kick him out, and my heart wasn't in it. I don't want to see him. I feel like he doesn't love me." Betty's lips twisted and trembled. "And nobody loves me. I have no one in this world. Except with you, I can talk about everything, like with my little brother." She suddenly burst into tears. "Harry. I feel so bad. In a moment, I lost my mom, my job, my money, and my peace. The doctor says I have depression. I need to fight it. But I don't know how to fight it. The fear at night is suffocating me. Maybe I'm afraid of death, and I don't want anything." Harry saw that she was truly in a very bad state. He took her hand and smiled. "I thought I had no one in this world, and suddenly my little sister appeared. Betty, don't cry. Today, I'll stay with you and chase away the fear. I'm your little brother after all. Let me have some bedding. I'll set it up on the couch and clear the table. Go sleep, and don't be afraid of anything." After washing the dishes, Harry peeked into the bedroom. Betty was sleeping, her hand under her cheek, smiling in her sleep. In the morning, she woke up first and quickly made some delicious cheesecakes. "How did you sleep, sis?" "Oh, you scared me. I slept wonderfully, like a log." "Thank you. Sit down to eat." "Okay. I'll just wash up." Seeing him off at the front door as he left for work, Betty asked him, "Come for lunch?" "Definitely." Harry went to see a doctor acquaintance, telling him that an elderly woman was feeling unwell. How to deal with severe depression after the death of a mother. Change the environment, fulfill a long-held dream, buy something new. A strong shock helps to distract from sad thoughts. Let her go somewhere. Harry brightened up. "Thanks. Now I know what to do." When he came for lunch, Betty greeted him cheerfully and elegantly. She set the table festively, as she used to when her mother was around, with a beautiful tablecloth, fine china, and a delicious meal. "Betty. Everything tastes so good. That's why I have a business proposal for you. I'm inviting you to work at my restaurant to train my staff in cooking deliciously." "But can I? I have no culinary education." "Why are you doubting yourself? Is it all about education? You're a professional and know how to work with people. Can I start tomorrow? I don't want to sit alone at home. Tomorrow we're flying to Paris." She looked at him from under her lashes with such a heavy gaze that he got scared. "What's wrong with you? Aren't you happy? You're making fun of my dream to visit Paris? How could you think that? I've never been there either. I want to go with you to see this wonderful place with my own eyes. I just need your passport." She lowered her head and sighed quietly. "Harry, I have no money. I only have $500 left. You're my future employee. I'll pay for the trip now, and then you can work it off. Where's your passport? I'm getting the tickets. I've already booked a hotel, and you should get ready. We're taking an evening train to New York. They arrived in France early in the morning. Betty stepped off the plane as if entering an enchanted world. It was hard to believe that her dream was coming true. She looked around with wide eyes, afraid of missing anything. The huge, bright airport building, the friendly, smiling staff, the unfamiliar melodious language all around her. Like a little girl in a fairy tale, she simply reveled in it, joyfully absorbing the unfamiliar sounds, sights, and scents. She was going to Paris, and her dream, which had always seemed unattainable, had come true. It was a foreign and unfamiliar world, but she didn't feel intimidated or afraid because Harry was by her side. She looked at him with different eyes. Here, he felt like a fish in water, instantly oriented himself, confident and calm, speaking English as if it were his home language. He took her hand and led her wherever they needed to go. All she had to do was obediently follow him. It was as good and convenient as it used to be with her mother. She could absorb new experiences without thinking about anything else. She could enjoy the trip on a clean, comfortable bus, admire the beautiful French countryside and the well-maintained roads amidst manicured fields and groves. And here was Paris. She examined every building, trying to peek around the next corner in advance. She observed the people who lived here, rushing about their business, unaware that they were living in Betty's fairy tale. The hotel near the northern train station turned out to be small but cozy. They were greeted by a cheerful Frenchman with his curly black hair standing on end. He was grinning widely and asked Harry something, glancing at the silent Betty. They climbed to the second floor via an old spiral staircase. The guy's name was Jean-Paul, and he struggled to open the stubborn lock, inviting Betty inside with a gesture. The room was tiny but incredibly cozy. The window overlooked a wide street. When Harry came to get her, Betty was still sitting in front of that window, gazing at it as if it were a television with the sound turned off. He immediately started apologizing for choosing such a small hotel with tiny rooms due to cost savings and not being in the city center. Betty looked at him, not understanding what he was saying. Harry, you're a wizard. You've given me a fairy tale. He calmed down and smiled. Feeling tired from the journey? Go freshen up in the bathroom and take a break. Then we'll go wherever you want. I want to go to the Eiffel Tower. Right now. I'm not tired at all. Just let me wash up and change. 20 minutes later, they descended a narrow staircase to the dining area. They ate airy croissants, washed down with strong coffee and cream and hurried outside, where the North train station building loomed in the distance. They walked along the boulevard among chestnut trees and small cafes to the metro station. Betty was surprised by the simplicity of the Parisian metro system. It was clean and convenient. Spotting the Eiffel Tower in the distance, she gasped and quickened her pace. It felt like she wasn't walking but floating above the ground. Closer and closer came her giant, lacy dream. At last, she touched its rough base with both hands, staying there for a few minutes before turning to Harry. Her eyes shone with a deep violet color, and all her facial features seemed relaxed and youthful. On her lips, there was an incredibly happy and serene smile. Harry, I'll be completely healthy now. Thank you. Let's go further. We'll definitely go up the tower. I've already bought tickets for 8 days from now. I thought that after the journey, we should take a rest today. But that's very expensive. I know. But when will we have the chance to come back here together? We need to make the most of this trip. We only have 10 days. Then let's go to Notre Dame Cathedral. But first, let's have a look at the Eiffel bust. It should be on the north side. Seeing the gilded bust, Betty turned around. Imagine. This man invented the tower that his contemporaries criticized and demanded to remove from the city streets as an ugly structure. And can you imagine Paris without the Eiffel Tower? On the square in front of the Notre Dame Cathedral, Betty stopped. What do you think? Have they replaced the cobblestones here, or have they remained the same? Did Esmeralda's light footsteps touch this pavement? I don't think so. Most likely, they've been replaced, possibly more than once. Yes, you're probably right. Since the 11th century when they started building it, a lot of time has passed. They worked on it for almost 150 years. Then they even wanted to dismantle it. Some of the stained glass windows were lost. During the Revolution, they knocked off the heads of the statues of kings. True, they later restored them, and the cathedral was adorned with images of chimeras. Seeing the Notre Dame Cathedral was my dream. I can't believe it's right in front of me. Harry. How happy I am. She squeezed his hand and looked into his eyes. And will we go up to the top with the gargoyles and chimeras? After all, from there, you get the most beautiful view of Paris. Definitely. Although there's a long line to get in, it moves very quickly. Let's wait, we're not in a hurry. Let's go inside the cathedral first. They entered the giant dimly lit hall, illuminated only by the stained glass windows. The vault of the building seemed to hang above the columns supporting it. How could people in those ancient times, when there weren't even construction machines, create such a wonder that has lasted for centuries? Betty smiled, looking at Harry's amazed face. Back then, Paris had 10,000 residents. They expected everyone to come to the service at once. We'll definitely come back here in the morning on a sunny day to see the stained glass windows shine. And today, at sunset, we'll go up the tower. Standing in line, they climbed the spiral staircase to the first platform. Harry stopped in his tracks. In front of them lay a vast modern city, recognizable from historical photographs, buildings, squares, streets. Betty was right. It's not just a city, it's a dream, and she chirped happily. There they are. Sinister gargoyles, according to legend, the petrified souls of sinners. Now, as the sun sets, the gargoyles are watching and waiting for darkness to guard the cathedral, she laughed. I have goosebumps. Against my will, I start to believe in heaven and hell, and it's all just decorations for ancient gutters. While Harry gazed at the panorama of the legendary city, he whispered to her. Betty. You've shown me another world. I always believed that people are wicked and greedy, going through life grabbing whatever is within their reach and taking from the weak. If they undertake construction, it's done carelessly, without thinking that their creation will soon crumble, and no one will look for those responsible. After all, nowadays, the main goal of any construction is to line one's pockets and take from the state or from others. But here, I've realized what a person can create. Thank you. Betty woke up very early. She decided to take a walk near the hotel before breakfast, but the lock got stuck again, it wouldn't open. With difficulty, just like yesterday, she finally managed to extract the key and descended the stairs. She greeted the beaming Jean-Paul and took a pencil and a notepad from him. She carefully sharpened the pencil lead with a paper knife and motioned for the guy to follow her. At her door, she inserted the slip of paper into the keyhole and blew on it to let the fine dust get inside and act as lubrication. She then inserted the key, and it turned easily. Jean-Paul was smiling. Merci. Madame. Naturellement. And he said something else as she hurried towards the exit. The sun was slowly rising. Betty walked through the streets of Paris towards the dawn, turning her face up to the gentle rays. The huge city was waking up. The first pedestrians appeared, rushing about their business. She hadn't been this happy in a long time, not since her youth. The sun was already above the rooftops. It was probably time to go back, otherwise, Harry might lose her. But she realized that she didn't know where she had come and where the hotel was. The fairy tale had vanished in an instant. Betty stopped, and a cold sweat immediately broke out on her back. Did that mean she was afraid again? Fear bound her mind. She only realized that she didn't know what to do. Her phone and the map of Paris provided by the concierge were left on the nightstand, and in her hands, she held only the key to her room. She had forgotten the name of the tiny hotel, only remembering that the entrance was on a small street, and her window overlooked a wide one. That's all the information she had. She felt like she had been scalded with boiling water. Even if she managed to remember the name of the hotel, she wouldn't be able to ask anyone. In her life, she had to study German at school. Almost everything had been forgotten, but she could still say a few words. She had tried to learn English in courses, but the teaching was poor, and she had given up. As for French, she didn't know it at all, except for a few common words. How helpless she was. What if she had come here alone without Harry? He would lose her now. A sense of horror engulfed her, her tank top stuck between her shoulder blades, her fingers grew cold, and her palms turned damp. Her head was pounding. What should she do? Which street was the hotel on? She didn't know. She didn't even know its name. She couldn't ask anyone. She needed to calm down and remember how she had walked here. Had she walked here? It seemed like it. Did she turn the corner 3 times or 2 houses? Betty slowly walked back, attempting to reconstruct her path from memory. Twice she had to retrace her steps and start over. And suddenly, she saw the porch of her hotel. She hadn't felt this happy in a long time. The tiny lobby felt like home, and the spiral staircase was not very tall. Jean-Paul, with the piece of paper, stopped at another door. He waved to her as if they were old acquaintances. Straight to the bathroom. Half an hour later, Harry knocked on her door. She embarrassed him, embracing him tightly and giving him a loud kiss on the cheek. Harry, my dear. I'm so glad you're with me. Don't flatter me. We're still going to the park for exercise and a run. I'd go with you anywhere. After their workout and breakfast, they went out into the street again. It was already scorching hot. They approached the Alexander III Bridge. Harry. What a beautiful bridge. Don't hurry. Let's stop and look at the Eiffel Tower. Harry was only looking at her. Betty's face was radiant, her eyes wide open, shining with an extraordinary light. Was it a reflection of the bright sunlight, or had he too fallen under the magical spell of Paris? Let's go inside the church at Les Invalides. It should be cool in there. And indeed, in the cool semi-darkness of the building, they comfortably sat down on a pew. In the empty hall, the sounds of an organ were solemnly filling the space. A clergyman in black robes approached them and asked something. Harry listened, smiled, and shook his head in the negative. Betty inquired. What did he say? He asked if we wanted to get married? He mistook us for lovers. Get married to the sound of an organ? What a dream. But aren't we both non-Catholics? Will we change our faith? You're such a fantasist. Exiting the cathedral, they crossed the square to the Rodin Museum, where Betty marveled at each exhibit, feeling no fatigue and listening absently to the electronic guide. Betty moved from one masterpiece to another. First in the mansion and then in the garden. She had seen them many times in reproductions, but now it seemed as if these were real, living people who had suddenly frozen and then transformed into marble sculptures. And tomorrow we have tickets to the Louvre. Harry announced over dinner. Betty appreciated his foresight the next day. Come here. Visitors enter the Louvre through a glass pyramid, waiting in line for 2 to 3 hours, but we have a guide waiting for us who will take us through a separate entrance. You're amazing, Harry. It's a shame to waste several hours waiting. Clutching Harry's hand in excitement, she entered the museum as if entering a mysterious world. Betty had always dreamed of seeing the famous artworks from her childhood reproductions and postcards, Leonardo da Vinci's Mona Lisa, the ancient sculptures of Venus de Milo and Winged Victory of Samothrace, Michelangelo's The Dying Slave and the Rebellious Slave, and other masterpieces. She roamed through the halls of the renowned museum she had read and watched so much about and couldn't believe that she, Betty, was here. Harry had given her all of this. Her kind wizard. She told him the story of the exhibits she knew so much about. On the way to the hotel, they stopped at a tiny cafe near their hotel. The owner, a lively young Italian, welcomed them as dear guests. Looking at the menu, Harry couldn't find a single familiar name. Moreover, the prices were quite reasonable, and when the owner asked in broken French, Give us whatever you want." The Italian's eyes lit up with enthusiasm. He quickly brought a huge plate, about 40 centimeters in diameter, and placed it in front of them. Around the delicious meat, there were beautifully arranged vegetables, fresh and stewed, and most importantly, they tasted amazing. The bill turned out to be only 16 euros. Betty raised her hands in amazement. Why do we go to expensive restaurants when they serve delicious and inexpensive food here? She addressed the owner. Everything is very tasty. Thank you very much. But seeing that he was looking at her questioningly, she simply hugged and kissed him on the cheek. Grand merci, dear. Harry provided a hint. His name is Luigi. The Italian cast a frightened glance at the customer, thinking the man had something against him. Harry, smiling at him, took Betty by the hand and led her out onto the street. With your straightforwardness, you'll scare off all foreigners. They spent a whole day at the Palace of Versailles. Inside the chateau, they entered the Hall of Mirrors, and then the royal chambers. Harry liked the Museum of the History of the Palace of Versailles, especially the War Room. Betty exclaimed in delight. Living history right before our eyes. A palace where I can imagine the king and his courtiers strolling through the grand rooms. They walked into the park, and Harry took her to dine at Angelina, where she once again sighed quietly when looking at the menu. He took her luxurious folder and placed the order. Harry, I'll never be able to pay you back. Am I asking you to? Eat and enjoy. In the park, she came to life again, recalling the pages of French history, envisioning the alleys filled with courtiers having fun. How many intrigues these palace walls and park pathways must remember. He watched her with a smile as she quickly descended the wide staircase to the fountain. Where had the sick, aging, and limping woman gone? As she stood there, letting the water splash her face and hands, she joked. So, this is where the favorites and court ladies used to have fun? In the evening, they relaxed at a table on the boulevard, sipping coffee and observing the Parisians. People came here not only for food but also to work on their laptops, chat with friends, or simply be among others instead of being alone at home. As they walked to the Musée d'Orsay the next morning, Betty gave a lecture. Harry, my mother told me about the masters and their works in the Impressionist style since my early childhood. Harry listened to her attentively. She introduced him to a new world he hadn't yet encountered, and Betty herself revealed an unexpected side to him. Now he understood the profound difference in her perspectives on the world around her and her passionate enthusiasm. He watched and marveled at the extent of her knowledge and memory. They had dinner at a small cafe where Luigi welcomed them as old friends each time, surprising them with new dishes. After their morning jog, Betty asked, "Today is so sunny, can we visit Notre Dame again tonight?" She entered the cathedral as if enchanted. Look how incredibly beautiful it is inside, the height, the stained glass windows, the way the sunlight plays on the stone floor. A miracle. Oh, how lucky we are. We accidentally attended Sunday Mass. Betty stood there with her eyes closed, her lips moving slightly, perhaps praying along with everyone. Already outside, as if awakening, she whispered. Something magical. And now to Sainte-Chapelle. It's the holy chapel built by Louis IX to house relics. There are famous stained glass windows on the second floor meant for the king. Moreover, most of the colored glass has been preserved from medieval times. But the lower tier for the courtiers should be good too. In a restaurant where Harry practically forced Betty to go in the evening, she was being picky. Not only is it expensive, but it's also not very tasty. The cutlets are dry. I would put some butter inside, and for those who like it, some cheese. Harry praised her. I agree with you. You're amazing. You'll be the chef at my restaurant. Returning from the park to the hotel for breakfast the next morning, Betty requested. I want to see the illuminated Eiffel Tower tonight. They arrived early, having walked around the Champs-Élysées and the Arc de Triomphe during the day. They rested by the fountain in the Tuileries garden. Twilight slowly descended, and the tower stood out as a dark silhouette against the reddening sky. Betty was impatient. Will I ever get to see the sparkling tower? Wait. The lighting comes on at the beginning of every hour for 10 minutes during the dark hours. And suddenly, the massive tower lit up, bathing the gathered spectators in golden light, like a giant golden Christmas tree blinding their eyes in the surrounding darkness. They strolled for a whole 4 hours, and each time, Betty eagerly watched the shining wonder for all 10 minutes. Not opening her eyes yet, waking up and reliving the joy of happy visions in her dreams from childhood, Betty realized that reality was even better. Today, she would ascend the Eiffel Tower. She would see all of Paris from a great height. A celebration of the soul. What should she wear? Perhaps this elegant light lilac tunic? Her friends gave it to her as a gift when she was setting off. Harry stopped in the doorway, seeing Betty. The light material gently hugged her toned figure. The color accentuated her eyes, which had sparkled with anticipation and excitement. Harry, you look so elegant today in this blue shirt. I have to at least somewhat match up next to such a beauty. Harry had definitely decided to give her a complete celebration. They rode the elevator, bypassing the first and second levels, and reached a small platform designed for 800 people. Betty gripped Harry's hand and, gazing at the panorama of her dream city, occasionally turned to him with happy eyes. Imagine. Eiffel used to have his office here, and every day, he looked out over the magnificent city before him. Soon, a waiter approached with 2 glasses of chilled champagne. She took a sip and closed her eyes. I'll remember this moment forever, and you, my dear brother, for giving me such happiness. She sipped it slowly, gazing into the distance, when Harry whispered. It's time to go. A table has opened up in the restaurant. We're going down to the second level. She was amazed. To Jules Verne restaurant? Are you out of your mind? I've read you have to pay €300 per person there. He just shrugged and gestured to her to follow the waiter. Their table was right by the window, small, elegant, with a white starched tablecloth. Everything was set up as it should be for a beautiful fairy tale, and the fairy tale prince sat across from her, smiling. His hazel eyes looked at her tenderly, and they were honey clear again. Sweet Harry. I don't know how to thank you. Just enjoy. Betty had never been happier. After breakfast at the hotel, they decided to take a walk to Montmartre. She climbed the slope effortlessly, without getting out of breath, like a young girl. Look. There, on the hill, is the Sacré-Cœur Basilica. Do you see its white domes? Harry only looked at her reddened and spiritually uplifted face. And there's the Moulin Rouge, the famous Parisian cabaret. She firmly grasped Harry's hand and dragged him to a sculpture depicting a person seemingly emerging from a brick wall. This is Du Côté de la Rue Marcel Aime, the main character from the story, The Man Who Walked Through Walls, by the French writer Marcel Aime. The people of Montmartre believe that Du Côté de la Rue Marcel Aime's left hand brings good luck and grants any wish you make. You just need to touch it and ask for what you desire. She touched the monument's hand and closed her eyes. Then she pounced on Harry. Make a wish and touch Du Côté de la Rue Marcel Aime. He reached out, touched the cool stone, and suddenly, to his surprise, he thought, I want Betty to love me and become my wife. They had lunch in a small restaurant. Harry ordered such delicious food. Or was she really hungry? They were served 2 glasses of dark red wine. Genuine French wine from the Montmartre vineyards. You can enjoy it. The wine turned out to be sweet and sour and slightly bitter. Her head began to spin gently. But when Betty saw the bill amount, it was like a splash of cold water. €180? Unbelievable. Harry calmly smiled. Believe me, it's not expensive. In the evening before bed, they went for a walk on the crowded boulevard. People were relaxing at sidewalk cafes with a cup of coffee. The coffee was wonderful. Harry. I keep thinking. What if you're a fairy tale prince? Maybe, but once upon a time, I was very much cursed by an evil witch. Don't make things up. You're the best fairy tale prince. With each passing day, she amazed him more, igniting him with her energy. This wasn't the same Betty he had met at the sanatorium, lethargic and inert. Sometimes, in his eyes, she seemed a bit childish, but she was active and fast, which piqued his curiosity. He liked her. She had a goal, knew exactly what she wanted, and she wanted to see and embrace this city steeped in history. She knew so much about Paris, and her dream wasn't just a passing whim, it was a lifelong dream that was coming true. That's why she was energetic, strong, and happy. On their last day, Betty called her friend. Gwen. Words can't describe it. You absolutely must see and experience it. We're saying goodbye to Paris now to preserve its charm in our memory. Hemingway said that Paris never ends, and everyone who has lived there remembers it in their own way. That's it. Harry has arrived. She chuckled and mischievously glanced at Harry. Yes, exactly, Harry. Farewell. Their flight was in the evening, so they decided to have one last look at Paris. They took a bus tour for an overview of the city one more time. Then they went to Luigi's cafe for lunch and to bid him farewell. New York greeted them as unfriendly as always. A cold wind blew, an annoying drizzle fell. Quickly to the station and back home. Gwen and Judy, who had come to meet her, immediately bombarded her with questions. How could they not be surprised? In just 10 days, her friend had changed drastically in appearance. She had become more toned, lost some extra weight, her face had freshened up, her eyes were sparkling, but, most importantly, she was full of energy, quick, and full of life. Judy took the lead. When are we having the wedding? Have you lost your minds? What wedding? With Harry. You're crazy. What's wrong with me? Gwen, pursing her lips, replied to Judy herself. She was a fool before and remains one. But now, she's a cute fool. Girls. Come on, now. He's such a good friend. There's no one better than him in the world, but there's no love between us. And there can't be. Let's keep it this way to avoid ruining anything. Did you tell him that? Judy asked. Of course not. The friends exchanged glances, and Judy once again called her a fool. Betty, not at all offended, just smiled. So, do you think I should propose living together to him? What if he refuses? Then you'll go back to living alone, Judy grumbled. After some thought, Gwen asked. What do you stand to lose? The phone rang, and Betty's eyes lit up. She answered. Yes, Harry. On Friday at 5, I'm inviting you to my restaurant. You can see where you'd like to work or just be my guest if you want. Tomorrow. All right, she hung up the phone. Well, there you go. He invited me to work, and that's it. But you were all making up scenarios here. Seeing that she looked a bit sad, Gwen decisively declared. Tomorrow morning, pick out a dress. We'll make a queen out of you. There are lots of guys in the restaurant. Why did fate bring you and Harry together? Betty pondered all evening. Maybe there's no one better than Harry. But apparently, he doesn't need me. Maybe it's better to ask him or just work alongside him without delving into feelings. The next morning, Betty and Gwen went shopping. All of Betty's previous dresses were too big for her, and on her size, only gray, dark blue, or black and white shapeless sacks hung. Let's go to a specialty store. They always have interesting styles for people like me. But even there, blue and brown seemed to dominate. A salesgirl approached them. Gwen asked her for advice. Please recommend a dress for my companion. The girl smiled. What color are you interested in? Do you have any outfits or dresses in the style of an English queen? She brought 2 elegant dresses of the same style, a delicate pistachio and a peach one. When Betty tried them on, she looked like a queen. Both dresses concealed everything that needed concealing, making her look slim and elegant. Betty thought for a long time about which color was preferable. Of course, if she had more money, she would have taken both. But she'd need to buy shoes too, and this dress required a hairstyle. They decided to choose the peach one. The shoes were found in a nearby store, made of soft leather, wide, with a comfortable low heel. A friend from a nearby hair salon did her hairstyle. She also lightly filled in her eyebrows, added a touch of peach blush to emphasize her cheekbones. Harry beamed as he opened the car door for her. "You're always beautiful, but today you're especially stunning." At the restaurant, Betty entered feeling like a queen, and by her side was her Harry, just like in Paris. Only with him did she feel good and calm, like with a family member. At the table, decorated with orchids, a young waiter awaited them. Harry merely glanced at him, and the waiter filled their crystal glasses with wine. "I want to make a toast. To you. The most beautiful woman. Harry, my dear. And I want to toast to you." She drank it all in one gulp. "I am so grateful to you. You gave me back my health and the joy of life. You've spent so much money, time, and effort on me. Thank you." She paused for a moment, then smiled and firmly declared, "Actually, I want to confess that I love you." Looking at her, he half-jokingly clarified, "As a younger and beloved brother?" She hesitated for a moment, then straightened up resolutely. "Maybe normal women don't do it this way. Of course, I'm shy, but I want to propose. Marry me." She had never seen Harry like this before. He had never looked at her this way. Betty was scared. Had she ruined everything? "Well, why are you silent? Am I too old and fat for you? Forgive me. But I want to live with you. I can't live without you now. I want to fall asleep and wake up with you by my side." Harry smiled and almost whispered, "Aren't we too old for love?" "No. It turns out it's never too late to love. Aren't you worried that people will laugh at us? We won't interfere with anyone's life with our love. Aren't you in doubt? Are we a good match? I'm small, and you're so curvy." She got angry. Harry was teasing her using her own words. "Harry, that's all nonsense. You know, I've realized the most important thing. You, my gray." He laughed. "I've wanted to tell you for a long time that there's no one better than you in the world and to propose to you, but I was afraid. I just couldn't summon the courage." Harry nodded to the young waiter. He picked up the prepared tray with a bottle of champagne, 2 festive wedding glasses, and a small velvet case. Harry took the engagement ring out of it. "Betty, I love you, and I ask you to be my wife." "Harry, I agree, and I'm incredibly happy." The young waiter quickly and skillfully uncorked the bottle, pouring the wine into the glasses. "Let's drink to us and our happiness." Suddenly, to the sounds of the wedding march, their table was surrounded by Harry's friends and restaurant staff, congratulating them. With moist eyes, she looked at her hand with the ring and then at her beloved. He had planned everything in advance. He loves her too. Later, when they were alone after a long and tender kiss, Harry whispered confidentially, "Betty, how does happiness feel in your soul right now? Our fluffy little kitten?" He's purring with joy, realizing that it's never too late to love.